There it was, in all its glory, Bandora City. The four of us stood upon a small hill in the grass plains, staring out at the large city. It wasn't some high-tech futuristic place, but it was an amazement to our eyes. The buildings were huge and looking cool, styled in a combination of samurai towers from Japan and a modern look. You could see glowing usernames floating over the heads of players as they walked through the city. Some were simple level 5s, others were up to level 50. "So, this is Bandora City?" I asked as I took a bite of the chocolate bar Kira had given me. Liru nodded.
It's the biggest area in the entire map. Well, so far. I heard in a few months some new expansions coming out.
I've never been here. After I got to Wildband, I stayed to be a healer. Never went any further.
Well, let's go then.
Kira grabbed my hand and ran down the hill, dragging me with her. Kieran and Liru followed closely behind, Liru going into a samurai running style, while Kieran was just attempting to keep up. From the second we walked through the entrance, I was amazed. The entrance was a large black gateway with a purple bubble-like barrier from the plains to the actual city. Kira had explained it was a barrier from the PvP to a no-fighting area. Unless two players agreed to a duel or there was some special event, there was no fighting inside the city. Liru smiled as she sheathed her sword, walking through the barrier first. Kieran followed, his staff fading away into his inventory. I sheathed my starblade, and Liru clipped her wand to her belt. We all passed through one by one, and a small tingling feeling ran through my body. I then remembered something. Chloe was watching me. Since I'd entered the game and woken up in the cottage, it had been a 3-hour journey from Wildband Town to here. I checked in the game time. It was around 7 p.m. As long as she had not brought Mother upstairs to see, which she probably hadn't, I'd be fine.
Come. I will show you to my blacksmith.
Liru gestured us to follow her, and Kira ran ahead. Kieran and I walked side by side, and I could see Kieran removing something from his inventory.
Aldren, I'm curious to know. Are you with either of them? Romantically, I mean.
I blushed a bit. No! Liru was a bit too, what's the word? Okay, well, she scares me.
So you feel the same way. She is scary, but comforting. Well, comforting to know she's there. A girl like her doesn't seem to give up. I guess in a boss fight, she'd always have your back.
The menu then opened randomly, popping up in front of me. A friend request from Kieran.
Seeing as I have no other arrangements than sitting around in Wildband, shall I be allowed to join your little group?
I shrugged and hit accept, making him smile for a second before we both turned forward. Kira and Liru were walking down an alley, and we both quickly followed behind. We came out of the alley to find a large wall of shops and markets in front of us. All of them were decorated a bit weirdly, consisting of large red awnings over the entrance and a sign that read whatever the shop was selling. One read Wobblelord's Cookie Stash, which looked to be a cafe. Another read A1PH3's Brothel, which looked to be just what it was called. And looked over to Liru and Kira, who were walking to a large store on the end. It had a single wooden desk in the opening and swords encased in glass on the walls. An awning in the same shade as Liru's frost blue hair and tail stood over the entrance. Liru came right up to the desk and a panel popped up in front of her. She pressed the button on the middle of the panel and disappeared in a burst of sparkles. However, a white outline appeared behind the desk and slowly turned back into Liru.
So, this is your blacksmith sister?
Asked Kira as she looked at a large silver shield for vanguards on the wall. Liru nodded.
One of the best in the city. Better deals than the official ones owned by the NPCs. One of the best in the city. Better deals than the official one owned by the NPCs.
I looked to my sheath and pulled out the starblade, holding it up to the light. Liru took a glance at it, and I set it down on the counter in front of her. Can you improve this?
I can try. A Starblade. I'll see what I can do. But I'll need some pay.
My menu opened up, and I looked over at the currency, seeing I probably had more than enough of whatever she needed. However, Kira pushed my menu to the side, staring at her sister.
Sister, he's the reason I'm not restarting all the way back in Varlon. He's our friend, so cut him some slack.
Liru sighed, probably annoyed at the money she'd lose from improving the sword I'd been told by Dunlas was weak. But she gave in and took the sword.
All right. It'll be ready in an hour. In the meantime, I suggest taking a look at the sites. If we're going out to collect the rest of the champion armor, then we'll probably leave some time tomorrow.
Kira nodded and turned around, running off down the alley we had come through. Kieran and I followed shortly behind, not wanting to get lost. However, Kira was fast, and her orange tail moved in the breeze as she ran. Kira, where are we going?
A place!
Well, that answers all our questions,
Exclaimed Kieran sarcastically as she turned a corner. We came out to see her walking into another building, a tavern labeled the Lazy Spoon. Without questioning the name, we walked inside, entering a place of drunk players and dim lights. The place looked to be old, the wooden walls having a bit of dust. However, the nice red and gold carpet covering the floor was a nice touch, and the booths on the side, coupled with the four-person tables in the middle, perfected it. The bar was in the back, two blue flames levitating at both ends. Players littered the bar, taking up almost every seat. We found Kira sitting at a booth and we walked over to join her.
People say that this place is known for a special drink. It's called the Brew of Dawn. Supposed to give a 24-hour stat boost to everything. Also, it tastes like whatever your favorite food is.
She explained as she looked around eagerly for a waiter or waitress. So, say my favorite food is turkey. Then, would the drink taste like turkey?
Yeah, but to me, it'd taste like freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. Oh wait, Aldren-kun, do you have the cooking skill?
She opened my inventory for me somehow and began scrolling through my inventory, trying to find the skill category from the other side of the booth. I opened it for her, showing her my limited amount of skills.
Element attacks. Max luck skill. Damn. Oh, here it is. Aw, you only have level 4 cooking skill. Kieran!
She grabbed Kieran by the arm and opened his inventory, scrolling through his skills. However, his cooking skill was even worse, being level 2.
Seriously, so you have max luck and you have level 24 healing? Why can't you have any fun skills?
She pouted and laid her head down on the table, waiting for someone to come by. Eventually a man did, holding up 3 silver platters. He laid them all down in front of us and walked by without taking our order. Didn't seem that they needed to, though, as a menu popped up in front of the platter displaying a list of foods. I scrolled down the list, eventually settling on mac and cheese and this brew of dawn Kira spoke of. Sure enough, when the menu disappeared and I pulled the top of the platter, the brew and mac and cheese were there. Kieran took his off as well, showing a few turkey legs and his brew of dawn. Kira did the same and a plate of chocolate chip cookies plus the brew laid in front of her. She began gobbling them down, eating the bite-sized cookies one by one. Me and Kieran were amused, but ate our food as well until one of us spoke up.
So wait, I don't want to sound creepy or anything, but you guys aren't some 30-year-old nerds with no life, right?
Kieran asked us curiously. I'm 15, as far as I know, I answered after swallowing a bite of my dish.
Same.
Said Kira through her cookie-eating spree. Kieran smiled.
I'm 16, but don't worry, I'm not looking for locations or any crazy shit. Oh, sorry, are you okay with cursing?
We both gave him thumbs up and he shrugged, finally picking up his brew. We stopped to watch him, seeing the silvery liquid leave the glass and run down his throat. A few seconds later, his eyes flashed, and his body began to change. Not in a bad way, but it seemed to be glowing. He looked different, better. His arms looked a bit more muscly through his wraps, and his skin looked to be glowing in health. He took a sip, then stretched out his hands. What the feeling to our actual bodies would do intrigued me. Kira and I took our glasses, toasting with Kieran before taking a sip of the drink. My body began to lighten, and I felt something grow inside of me, like I was becoming stronger, faster, tougher, like a god. However, a few seconds afterwards the feeling faded, or at least became a bit less strong. I still felt different, though. A lot better than before. After we finished our drinks, Kira slammed her glass down on the table.
Have either of you seen the money event in the city center?
We answered no, and she smirked, taking our hands and dragging us out of the bar. As we walked out, the sunlight blinded us from the two of us sitting in the darkened bar for so long. She then broke away and ran off down a blue cobblestone path, me and Kieran making an attempt to follow. After several twists and turns and having to climb onto a rooftop to locate Kira after losing her for a minute, we found what she had been talking about. In the center of the city was a large golden fountain with silver water spraying out. People were gathered around a large circle arena to the right of it, and every few seconds we could hear screaming followed by the sound of cheering.
What are we here for?
Asked Kieran as a player limped away from the crowd, clutching his bleeding leg.
The money challenge.
When we both looked at her with puzzled expressions, she groaned and began to explain.
So every day the arena appears here. Each day it has a new mini-boss inside of it to defeat, and if you win, then you get 10,000 world chips. Yesterday it was some dude with black and white hair and a scythe. Nobody beat him. This guy is worse though. 54 player kills in an hour.
We walked into the crowd and managed to make it up to the front, where we were astounded by the bloody sight. A man wearing a long black cloak was standing in the middle of the arena, clutching a flaming sword and holding a player up by his neck. The man had messy white hair, and his arm was coated in the player's blood. After a few seconds, he tossed the player out of the arena, the user exploding into a burst of sparkles upon hitting the ground. 2 healers ran over to him, beginning to revive their fallen friend.
Any other fuckers want to get their guts torn out?
The white-haired demon man shouted. I took a few steps forward, shouting at the man, I'm up for a fight! Kieran and Kira both looked at me, shocked. It was a challenge I wanted to do. I never backed down. I'd already beaten one boss as a level 8, so I knew I could do it again. Well, technically I lost the first time, but this time it would be different.
Are you sure you know what you're doing?
I shrugged. Probably. Not the worst decision I've ever made. Definitely in the top 5, though, probably. The white-haired demon smiled deviously at me.
My next victim. This will be a piece of cake.
I turned towards the arena, approaching the small wooden steps to walk up, but before I could, I was stopped. We turned around to see Lyra running toward us, holding a long object in a black shroud. She stopped next to her sister, holding out the hidden object for me. I unwrapped it from the cloth, revealing the star blade beneath. However, it had been modified so a black metal outline surrounded the star, which was glowing with a weird energy inside. Etched into the shining blade were several magic runes, none of which I could read. I took the sword and walked over towards the arena, pushing past a few people. I forgot to ask Lyra what she had exactly modified it with, but that probably wouldn't matter too much, as long as I kept myself away from his blade and hopefully avoided being torn apart. From the stands, Kieran was examining the boss closely.
It appears to have more attack than defense. A few good strikes to its weak spot should be good enough to bring him down, but he actually has to last long enough to hit them.
A countdown appeared in front of me in glowing letters, and I watched as it slowly counted down to 1. The white-haired boss smirked, and I knew it wanted to kill me. But I wanted to kill it too. It was going to be a battle of will and strength. Me, a 15-year-old boy with suicidal tendencies and a lack of skills and everything. Him, a muscular demon with anger issues, a flaming sword, and 54 kills to his name. Seems fair, right?
Fight!
I swung my blade upwards, watching as his blade came flying into mine. The flaming silver blade clashed against my golden one, and sparks began to burst from the point our blades met. We were trapped in blade lock. However, after a few seconds he broke away, allowing me to slash the sword across his chest. His health actually went down a considerable amount, but not enough to prove fatal. He swung back again, and I quickly held my sword up in a defensive stance. He broke away and began going into a flurry of cuts and slashes which I either dodged or blocked. I was getting tired. The crowd was in awe.
He's doing it!
Yay, Aldren-kun!
I took a look at Kira as she cheered me on from the crowd. She jumped up and down, and her smile was simply dazzling. The few seconds of chance I took to look at her gave him an advantage. He took the opening and jabbed his blade forward as I tried to block with my own sword. Ah! His blade ran through my side and I clutched the bloody wound. However, his sword burst into flames, causing pain to surge through my body. That dawn brew must have been cancelled by the fight as it was doing nothing to protect me now. The crowd had gone from cheering for me to cheering for the boss.
Aldren-kun, don't give up!
But Kira still hadn't lost hope. Ah! I backed out from the blade, going towards the edge of the arena. However, before the boss could strike me down, I swung my blade, slashing the man across the chest. Something was wrong. I stumbled back as my body began to glow a shining white. My eyes flashed back and my blade began to change. The crystal turned to a blood red, and the blade turned from gold to black as I jabbed the blade forward through his abdomen. Blood spurted out, staining my outfit and draining his health bar. But after a few seconds, he finally swung his blade downwards, stabbing into my shoulder. It burst into flames and the pain returned to my body. However, neither of us could stop now. If I broke away, he'd strike me down. As both of our health bars had begun to go down, my body became weaker and weaker. I had taken down most of his health, and the small bit that was left was slowly going away, but the flame effect on his sword was boosting the rate the health of my bar. At this rate, it would turn out to be a stalemate. Then my sword began to shake, and a dark aura began to surround it. What had Lyra done to my sword? Raging flames! I shouted, not realizing what I was even doing. I used an elemental attack, causing the man's entire body to erupt in a burst of blue flames. Around me, the players watched in either awe or fear as his skin began to burn off, then his blood, and then everything else. till only a pile of burns remained. Finally, the sword turned back, the blade going gold and the crystal becoming gold once more. My body stopped glowing and I turned back to Kieran, Liru, and Kira. Then, all at once, the crowd erupted into cheers. Kira had managed to yank me from the crowd's grasp, and the four of us stomped over to a nearby alley. Kieran was glaring at Liru, who was trying to hide her shameful expression. Finally, when we were alone, Kieran spoke up.
What the hell was that? Do you not see what it did to him?
I didn't think it'd do that. It was supposed to boost its attack power, not turn him into a killing machine.
What's so bad about being a killing machine? They both looked at me for a few seconds. And then Kira summoned a small glass mirror from her inventory. She turned it to me, and I looked at myself. Dry blood was streaking down my face from my eyes.
Not only that, but demons are supposed to be immune to fire. Well, except vampires, of course. But if he's a demon, how did you burn him to death?
Kira raised her hand like a child in a classroom, and Kieran pointed to her.
Maybe it's an element attack?
However, we all knew that was wrong. An element attack simply gave your sword a boost of power and allowed you to kill enemies more efficiently and nicely. But turning into an invincible warrior was not part of that.
Well, if it's not an elemental attack, then maybe it's some high-leveled ability. Liru's the highest level out of all of us. Maybe she gave the sword some secret ability without any of us knowing.
Kieran said as he sat down on a wooden crate. Liru took the sword, pulling up a menu of its stats upon touching it. However, nothing looked out of place to her.
Why don't we ask Jack?
Kira suggested. Kieran looked puzzled on who that was, but me and Liru seemed to agree with her. He was high enough leveled, so maybe he'd know. Lyra took us back to her blacksmith, bringing us inside with her. Upon entering the back of the store, we saw the place littered with metal items, tools, and random swords. It was a bit messy, but not the worst. She led us up a spiral staircase up to the second floor of her place. We came into a large room, showing a white bed sitting upon a wooden platform in the corner. Two smaller beds sat nearby, and a couch and a table were also in the middle of the room. A door to the left labeled lavatory was there as well, along with a closet.
All right, so I'll take my bed. Kira and Kieran can have the guest beds. Aldren can have the table.
The table? What about the couch? I asked as I held the blankets in my arm. Before anyone could respond, Kira's life cat jumped from her shoulder, landing on the couch. It walked in circles a few times before finally resting right in the middle. I was getting beaten out by a cat. It was already getting a bit dark, so Lyra retreated to her bed. She opened her inventory and her clothes changed in a flash of light, a pair of white shorts and a white t-shirt covering her body. Kieran did the same at his bed, except that he had no shirt. The two fell asleep quickly, or at least Lyra did. Kieran closed his eyes, but I could tell he was still awake in some way. I walked over to the table and laid down the blanket. But before I could climb off, Kira took my wrist.
I'm not letting you sleep on the table. Just sleep in my bed.
She said as she led me away from the table. Where are you gonna sleep? I asked her. She giggled. We're both gonna sleep in your bed? At the same time? I asked. Kira frowned. No, that's not a problem at all. It's just, won't Liru kill me?
Well, do you have school tomorrow?
She asked as she grabbed a towel from the closet. She pulled it out and walked towards the bathroom. Yeah, I think so.
Well, log out when you gotta go to school and log back in when you're home. Besides, I'll just cast a shield spell if she wakes up before that.
Kira said jokingly. I nodded and she walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. A few minutes later, I heard the water turn on and I laid my head down on the bed, instantly falling under the control of the puffy mattress. It was much better than the old one I had at home. It almost felt as good as a cloud. As I laid on the bed, my mind began to wander. A few thoughts came to mind, besides if Chloe was still watching me or not. It was around 10 p.m. here, so 9 p.m. where I was. But I began to think of school. I'd managed to get help in a few subjects, like math and chemistry, but I was still unsure. I couldn't exactly cheat on the final exam, so I'd need to find a tutor. That was something I could figure out tomorrow. But something else popped into my mind. Naomi. I had taken those notes from her and answers to all my homework, but now I owed her a favor. Whatever it was, I hope to God she didn't make me do anything or embarrass me more like I was going to school naked or emailing the teachers explicit photos. She was sadistic like that. I turned my head to the side, spotting several small trinkets sitting on the nightstand. A glowing glass sphere was lighting up the room, acting as a lamp of some sort. Below that, there were a few chocolate chip cookies, her simple white wand, and a few loose silver coins. A glowing purple cube on the corner of the desk caught my attention, and I reached out to grab it. However, when I picked it up off the table, a glowing purple spark zapped my finger, causing me to drop it. It fell onto the floor, stopped, then rolled under the bed out of my reach. I frowned at the purple light leaking out from under the bed before laying back on the bed, relaxing my body. I heard the door open a few minutes later and turned my head to see Kira standing in the doorway. She had stepped out of the steam-filled bathroom, and I almost got a nosebleed till I realized the fact that she was wearing a towel. She approached the end of the bed and grabbed a pair of black panties and a bra from her chest before looking up at me and blushing.
Yeah, turn around,
She said as she held the towel closer to her body, hiding her clothes behind herself. My face turned red, and I turned to face the window, looking out onto the city below. There were many people walking in the streets under the streetlights, talking and exploring the wondrous city. I could see 2 wizards dueling in an alleyway, a few others cheering each side up. Nearby, 3 more players were strolling down the street, a black-haired swordsman, a sword-wielding Lole, and a tall succubus. Near them was an old potion shop, the shopkeeper arguing with another player over a potion. I never thought I'd be in a place like this. For the past 2 years of my life, my routine was just going to school, being beaten up, going home, and crying myself to sleep every night as I contemplated whether or not killing myself would be the right choice. I would leave behind a grief-stricken mother and my sister. At least my suffering would be over, and my mom could probably support Chloe better without having to spend anything on me. I made my decision a few days ago, but before I could, I was stopped. And because of what that man did, I was now sitting on a bed that felt like a cloud, in a giant Japanese-styled city at the center of the ultimate fantasy world. I smiled to myself before my eyes refocused on my reflection, and more noticeably, the reflection of Kira behind me. She turned her head and gasped, turning red.
Perv.
I fell off the bed, hitting my head on the bedside table. Kieran groaned and sat up sleepily with his eyes still closed.
Is the goblin army finally invading?
No, just Aldren-kun trying to look at my boobs.
Kira told him as she pulled a simple white robe over her undergarments.
Oh, all right,
Muttered Kieran without a care in the world. He laid his head back down on Kira's side, tying her robe together. She jumped onto the mattress, bouncing a few times before snuggling up to her pillow. I crawled back onto the bed and laid on my side, trying to give her as much room as possible and me as least as possible. Her bushy orange tail was taking up most of the center of the bed and felt very soft to the touch as it brushed against my hand.
Good night, Aldren-kun.
Good night, Kira, I said back nervously. The light illuminating the room flickered off, and I was surrounded by darkness.